You've got to understand the human psychology going on, especially with someone in stress, to more effectively de-escalate a situation. We're all human. We're going to have good days and bad days. We're going to get frustrated. We're going to get tired. It's just the realization, having the situation awareness to recognize where we are emotionally, spiritually, psychologically in that moment, and then the self-discipline to recognize, okay, I need to keep my mouth shut, or I need to break contact with this person, or whatever. Different postures, facial expressions, the words you use, your tone of voice.
Welcome to Be Bold Branding, where we discuss the power of differentiating yourself through your own unique story and standout personal brand. In many areas of life, including business, we will no doubt face crisis. And how we handle that crisis depends on our knowledge, training, and experience. And that's why we've invited John Riley, founder and president of Gentle Response, to the show today. John is a Desert Storm veteran and retired patrol officer who is also a certified crisis intervention specialist through the National Anger Management Association. The name of his company comes from Proverbs 15:1 in the Message Bible: a gentle response diffuses anger. Let's learn more about John's journey and how he applies his method for conflict de-escalation.
John, welcome to Be Bold Branding.
I am happy to be here. Thank you.
Yes, sir. We're happy to have you on. First off, thank you for your service.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
We sincerely appreciate all of our veterans and our police officers too. My stepfather, who I really felt was my father, he was a police officer for 31 years in the Gwinnett County area, right outside of Atlanta.
Yep.
And several of my friends in school and their brothers were all police officers. So,
wow, small world.
It is.
Yes.
It really is.
Especially because I have a connection to Gwinnett County. Dad's from Marietta, Georgia, Ackworth, which I believe is just on the outside of Atlanta on the north side, I believe.
It is. We got a better connection even. That's the northwest side.
Okay.
And Gwinnett's the northeast side, about equal above, the Atlanta.
Okay.
proper.
Yeah.
And my dad's, my biological father's first car lot was in Marietta. So
is that right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of connections there.
Small world.
And I have been to Grand Rapids, Michigan 4 or 5 times myself, and that area of the world. I used to do events at the DeVos Center. Is that right?
DeVos Center.
Yes.
Center. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh,
Sure
wow. Small world.
I know. I love
smaller by the moments.
Yeah.
Well, we've done a little bit of what we like to start off with, John, is get to know our guests some. You want to tell everybody a little bit more about your background and what led you to birth this company, the Gentle Response?
Yeah, actually, I was well on my way into another career as a charter pilot when I retired from the police department in 2015. I had gotten my pilot's license when I was in high school. It kept me out of trouble. I worked at the little airport there. And as I was coming time to retire from the police department, I was like, all I ever really wanted to do was fly. So I started spending time, money, and effort to do that. But in 2016, one of the guys on my church security team, I attend a mega church here, they asked me to do a de-escalation class for our security team. And as I was putting the class together, I just suddenly literally felt this calling to just drop everything I was doing in regards of being a charter pilot and put together a training program, initially beginning with church volunteers and so on, to more effectively and successfully handle some of the situations they encounter. Because I have seen and unfortunately continue to see good people meaning well, but unfortunately are the ones that say and do things that escalate a situation. Because either A, they don't know what they don't know, or B, they just haven't got the training and the conditioning to more effectively handle a stressful confrontational situation. And from there, I had some business cards made up from Vistaprint.com, and here I am umpteen years later, talking to you guys. My team and I travel the country, working not only with churches now, but businesses, organizations, state agencies, educational, anywhere people have staff and volunteers encountering loud, rude, obnoxious, angry customers, clients, co-workers. I find myself helping them learn the basics. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
There'll be no end of business.
No, that's a fact. I hate that the world has gotten to where it's at. Seriously, I do. People have forgotten how to simply be nice, agree to disagree, and walk away.
Sure.
Oh my goodness. A
But
little
it's
kindness would go a
little,
long
right?
way.
But
Yes.
but it's good for business. But I hate the fact that the world's got to that way. It's just ridiculous.
It really is.
It is. You know, John, was there a specific incident that happened that really molded you toward the conflict de-escalation part of what you do?
No, I wouldn't say it was any one particular incident. Maybe a culmination of looking back at my life history as a police officer, the situations I was in that I was able to effectively de-escalate despite people trying to hurt me. It can be done. When you're dealing with someone who's highly intoxicated, drugs or alcohol, it can be very, very challenging. And there's not a single person watching this right now who at some point has not experienced what it's like to deal with someone who's really, really drunk, whether it was in college or Uncle Joe at the last family barbecue, just someone who's really drunk. It's very challenging, and especially when they become aggressive. But I know from experience it can be done. And a lot of people just have to take a moment and realize that patience and time can go a long ways. Being nice and just giving this person time to process what it is that you need them to do. We all know, we'll stick with like someone who's highly intoxicated with alcohol. We know scientifically proven that alcohol affects someone's ability to reason, rationalize, and process. And yet we forget that when we're dealing with the drunk and we need them to stop what they're doing or get out of the car or to leave the party. We become impatient, frustrated, and offended without giving them time to process that you want them to leave the party or whatever. And then we start getting frustrated, impatient, and then we start raising our voice. It starts coming out in our attitude to them. They get offended, and you can see where this now spirals out of control. So it wasn't necessarily one incident, but multitude of situations I was involved in, and then observing what I did different compared to other people. And so.
Sure. Do you feel like it has become worse overall since COVID, like post-COVID?
Yes.
You think people
It's a
are more
combination
full
of
angst?
things. And unfortunately, I personally, and this is my opinion, personally, I feel they're encouraged to act a fool because of the crap they see on social media.
Yeah.
And so there are people going out there deliberately acting the fool because they know they're going to get 1,000 more likes. If it gets really bad, they'll be held up as model citizens by the media, and they'll also be held up as victims. And so it's a win-win-win for them. And so unfortunately, I don't see how or when it can start getting better, but I start encouraging people, look, just because these people are acting the fool doesn't mean you do too.
Mm-hmm.
And just do what's right. Be nice, agree to disagree, and walk away. There is no law, rule, regulation, or policy that says that you will, you shall, you must engage, respond, and reply to every knucklehead who calls you a name or disagrees with you or whatever. Just walk
Right.
away.
Right.
Well, let's go down the foolishness track for just a moment, a little bit farther, because that is also my opinion. And Michael's too, I'm sure. We see a lot of foolishness out there, and you're right. It does prop people up to gain more attention, and in the end, somehow they become the victim, right? So how do you handle a situation where, let's say you've got a belligerent person, they've been drinking, and now they're causing issues, they're acting a fool, and how do you, can you give some tips on how to de-escalate that situation? Because
Yeah.
all of us, even if we're just going to a conference at some point, a business conference, those kind of things take place at conferences. They take place everywhere.
Sure.
Everywhere that you have human beings come in contact with each other. There was a time where you could go to a conference and find someone with a difference of opinion and decide, well, I'm not going to hang out with you and talk to you. I'll just walk over here to the other side of the room. But now people feel empowered to stay there and engage with you and with a tone of voice let you know that you're stupid and that you're ignorant. And it becomes very confrontational. So in a situation like that, really the quickest, easiest answer, and it's one of the hardest things to do, is simply not to be offended. Bam. Just don't let their difference of opinion or their attitude or the things that they're saying get underneath your skin. We have heard for eons, be the bigger person. But what does that actually look like in the moment when you've got someone acting the fool? Take a breath. Don't take it personally. Let it go. Just walk away. Now, I'll give you a real quick example of and it just happened today, earlier today. We had a gentleman come work on the house. He and I got into this conversation, and that's why I'm actually going to talk about this on my social media, just to show the crossroads that you can find yourself at. We're expecting some paperwork, and we thought he was going to be delivering it. When he showed up at the door, I greeted him and I said, hey, do you have this paperwork? And he looked stunned and he said, no, I don't. If I had been a homeowner who's having a bad day and upset, and this man shows up at my house without the paperwork I was expecting, I could have gone off the handle. And now he's put in a position where, okay, how do I handle this situation? Now, the way he handled it when he saw that I was kind of surprised that he didn't have it, he goes, wow, I am so sorry. I don't have this. What can we do to make this right? Now, I don't remember, because I walked away and I handed him off to my wife, but she told me he tried very hard to make it right. And so this is how he effectively de-escalated what could have been a potential confrontational situation with an angry homeowner, which I wasn't, but it could have been. He quickly apologized and owned up to someone else's mistake, but because he recognized he was a representative of this organization, I am so sorry. And he did it in a calm tone of voice. He didn't bark back at me, hey, that's not even my responsibility, or any number of knee-jerk defensive reactions and responses. And then he validated and affirmed that us and our problem by acknowledging we had an issue and asking, what can we do to make this right? Those two simple things right there are critical in de-escalating a situation. And I told him, you know what, buddy, I am going to talk about you and how you effectively handled what potentially could have been a tricky situation. But you find yourself in these situations, don't be offended. Don't take it personally. It may be someone who has a legitimate gripe, but they don't know how to express it properly. They don't appreciate or understand social norms. They don't have the same type of upbringing we did, and they're just rude. That doesn't mean you have to let it bother you.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's so big from somebody that has can have an explosive temper. I have had to learn that over time, but I also deal with a lot of people, and I deal with a lot of people with problems in the real estate. I'm in the real estate business, and so usually that's what you're doing, is solving some high pressured problem that's got to be handled at least within the next day or so, if not in the next hour. And the calmer, the cooler head prevails, and you have to do that, and I find, and I think you would say the same. I find, especially if you're dealing with somebody that's sober but upset about something, that a calmer voice, you're going to find the common ground. Nobody really wants to go to war over the phone or face to face and then leave under war, right?
Right.
We usually do. I had a situation where I had a client that put a scathing review up on our company website, and I didn't appreciate it, and so I called him up on the phone. I was not nice at first. I was because it was a lie. It wasn't true. And then he says to me, listen, I just needed to get your attention. And so that's all he had to say. And we ended the phone call 30 minutes later. Friends, shaking hands, everything's fine. Review comes down, everybody's happy, because he told me right off the bat what he needed. He just needed my attention, and I had not given him my attention yet because my other staff members had told him how the thing had worked out that he had a problem with, right? And I didn't budge on what they told him. He just needed to hear it from me, and so by just a kind voice, I was able to. After I was mad, of course, but thank goodness, I heard him. I guess is what's the most important thing. I could have approached it much nicer. And
you actually hit upon a point that I strongly emphasize in all my clients, whether it's a church or any type of business. This is how critical teamwork is. You could be telling me the exact same thing. You're 100%, but for some reason, I don't like the tone of your voice. I don't like your facial expression. I am just so angry. I don't want to hear from you. but you're wise enough to hand me off to Tanya, and she tells me word for word what you just did, but because it's coming from her, it's a different presentation. It resonates with me differently, and you just witnessed that happen with this guy. He just was not happy hearing it from your people. And you literally told him the exact same thing word for word, but for some reason it resonated with him differently. And that's why I'm always telling my clients, make sure that you recognize when it's time to disengage with someone, hand it off to your partner, supervisor, whatever. And chances are really, really good they will have a better effect than you did. Because for whatever reason right now, because having a rapport with someone is critical. If for some reason this person does not want to receive what you're saying, you've got to recognize that, because the longer you stay in that situation because you're in charge or you want to let them know that you're going to make this point or whatever, you're just escalating it. Just recognize the time to work together as a team. This is why we have teams.
Like what you're hearing? Hit that subscribe button and learn how you can change how you're seen and charge what you're worth.
Now, let me ask you this. Did you find that harder with the badge or easier without the badge in certain ways? So, like, I guess specifically when you were an officer, was there specific incidences where you were able to diffuse a critical situation? I guess that's a two-part question.
Yeah. As a civilian, now that I'm retired, the fact that I had a badge gives me credibility, because people understand I've been in a lot of stressful confrontational situations. When I was a police officer, it wasn't necessarily a plus or minus, and if anything, sometimes it was a minus because I was a cop. And so right off the bat, and that's actually something I teach police officers now every year, I tell them, look, you need to understand that right off the bat, you're climbing a very steep uphill battle because of what's going on out there, and people are conditioned to see you guys as the bad guys. You can mitigate that by the look on your face and the way you carry yourself when you're walking up the walkway. I promise you that before you even make it halfway up the walkway, they have already determined by the expression on your face and the way you carry yourself, they have already determined if you're a jerk, if they want to talk to you, or if they're even going to bother answering the door, just by body language alone. And so I try to tell people, it's little things that you can do as a police officer, standing there with your arms crossed. You know, this is just a quick example. This is one of the most comfortable body postures and positionings men and women assume. You're talking with your friends and relatives, but look how subtle it can be. It can change the message completely. Someone starts saying something, and the tension starts rising, and you just suddenly square off on someone, and all of a sudden the message becomes very confrontational and squared off. And if you are in a police officer or even dealing with a customer or client, if you're not careful, it's the little things that you say and do that you're not aware of that could potentially escalate that situation. So back to your question about being having a badge, it was me being aware that because I had a badge, it could potentially a detriment, and that I had to really try to work to get past that and let them know, hey, I'm John, this is just my job, I get it, I know you're upset, and really try to connect with them.
Yeah. I personally, of course, growing up with police officers, right, and growing up with parents that made me understand how important they are to society, and they help keep the peace. And if they tell you to freeze, and if they tell you it's don't move, and if they ask you for something, answer them, like the kind of things that unfortunately aren't necessarily taught these days. I've never had a problem ever with police officers, ever. And I find I'm really amazed many times at how well they handle high stress situations, even if that's a ticket. Right. I had a friend, he's 50 now, and he had never, ever gotten a traffic ticket of any kind. And I traveled as an auctioneer with him for years, like hundreds of thousands of miles together. and he never got a ticket. And I was with him when he got his first. And he was, of course, doing way too fast. He was like, I don't know, 80 in a 65 or 55 or something like that. So this police officer pulls him over, right? And he's cool to him, and and we're laughing, trying to cut up a little. But he says, "Hey, man, look, I've never had a ticket. Look at my record. Can you cut me a break?" And that guy was so cool, and he just put his hand on his forearm, on Nick's forearm, and he goes, "Man, I got people watching me too." And Nick's like, "I get it." And he paid his ticket and went on down the road, But I've really been impressed with police officers, especially I think now in this day and age where they've had more sensitivity training and stuff like that, to just sort of put up with it for a second and let them know, look, this is a job. This is how I feed my family, right?
Yeah,
I'm not
exactly right.
Rule. You are.
Exactly right. Exactly. And you know what? I appreciate your kind words, because it's a tough job. It's an amazing career, because very few careers out there allow you to go home at the end of the day and look in the mirror and know you made a difference in someone's life for the good. Yeah. Talking about de-escalation real quick, using a police situation, talking about traffic stops, but how you can apply this in the civilian world. And it's all basic human psychology under stress, okay? A person who's pulled over and a police officer standing over them, looming over them, to this person who's already stressed and confused and frustrated with the idea of being stopped and so on, you looming over them is an intimidating factor. Deep down inside, it can be triggering. And so what I would often try to do when I'm talking to someone, especially once things are winding down, just to mitigate intimidating them or stressing them anymore, I would lean over so that I'm eye level with them. As long as you're not looming over someone, you mitigate and eliminate the risk of looming over them and triggering in them that little primal fear that you're bigger, stronger, meaner, and more deadlier and scary than I am. And so once you get down to someone's eye level, you can help eliminate that potential stressor. That works in the civilian world, and parents often already know this instinctively, to get down to their child's level when you're trying to talk to them and caution them, I love you, but you can't be doing this, and blah, blah, blah. However, we both know I've also stood over my kids to let them know I'm serious. This is instinctive, and you've got to understand the human psychology going on, especially with someone in stress, to more effectively de-escalate a situation. We're all human. We're going to have good days and bad days. We're going to get frustrated. We're going to get tired. It's just the realization, having the situation awareness to recognize where we are emotionally, spiritually, psychologically in that moment, and then the self-discipline to recognize, okay, I need to keep my mouth shut, or I need to break contact with this person, or whatever. Different postures, facial expressions, the words you use, your tone of voice.
Yes.
Well, I have a question about, you mentioned you do a lot of speaking at churches these days. Why that transition, and what do you talk about?
I do these presentations, but the main bulk of my training is very heavily scenario based. I have a team of people to simulate very stressful confrontational situations. But when I do just do a speaking engagement, I remind everyone to just adopt the ministry mindset. Your default reaction and response to someone who walks into your church who DLR, don't look right, there's something about them that kind of catches your attention. Your response should be ministry, and go up there and greet them and see if they need a prayer, a hug, or a cup of coffee, as opposed to stand back and think about overlapping fields of fire and whether or not their bag has a bomb in it. Slow down. Our churches have been a beacon of light and hope for broken people for eons, and long after we're gone, it's going to continue to be a beacon of light for broken people. Expect broken people to come to church. Hello, sure. You're a broken person also. Take a deep breath and just consider being nice and just welcoming. One example story I have on my wife's side, a former family member was a rising praise and worship leader 30-some years ago. Unfortunately, liked his beer a little bit too much. Last we heard, he was living underneath a bridge somewhere in Kentucky. But every now and then he'll pull himself out and he'll try to head home to Rhode Island and all that. And I was speaking at a church in Connecticut. Literally, along the way, he would probably have to head home. And I told the people there, I said, I promise you that if he comes in here looking for a moment of rest and a moment of quiet with God, I promise you, he's going to look dirty, he's going to look disheveled, and he's probably going to smell. He's not going to look like the rising praise and worship leader he was 30 years ago. And how you respond to him or her, depending on the situation, but how you respond to him will either help him continue his struggle and fight to get back on track, or you're going to convince him that God doesn't love him and has abandoned him, and he's going to go back to that bridge in somewhere in Kentucky. And so I'm always telling people at churches, man, develop a ministry mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
I do too.
That has application to every walk of life.
Everywhere, yeah.
Everywhere. So in terms of your business, Gentle Response, what clients are you best suited to serve, John?
Everybody, anyone that has, because we adapt and improvise the scenarios to fit. Like this past weekend, we were working with transit bus drivers in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Next weekend, I'm going to be in a church in St. Louis, Missouri. So everything's, we adapt and improvise. If you have staff, volunteers that encounter loud, rude, obnoxious people or stressful confrontational situations, you're my people, because that is where I have seen good people in all walks of life, from fast food restaurants and all that across. You watch YouTube. There are examples across the board of people meaning well, but under stress end up being the ones that say or do things that escalate situations. Mm-hmm. And every situation is different, but the one consistency is the mental, psychological basics of a human brain, a primal human brain in crisis. The psychology doesn't change. Everyone wants to be treated with dignity and respect, as little as they seem to deserve it in the moment. Everyone, trust me, I know from experience, no matter how drunk they are or how loud and rude they are, they will key in on your disrespectful tone of voice, and it will spiral. So everyone wants to be treated with dignity and respect. Everyone wants to be validated and affirmed. Everyone wants to be heard. Across the board. If you can keep those three things, those basics in mind, and keep your own mouth shut so that you don't end up running at the mouth and escalating things, you're well on your way.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And even, I think even people with rising businesses, as they grow and they grow in, from maybe being a one-person team to a two-person team to a 10-person team to a 20-person team, your services probably are very valuable to those leaders on how they work with employees also, because
yes.
The last thing that any employee wants is to be degraded or and yet leaders tend, including me, I had to learn those lessons the hard way too. Lost some valuable people over the years because of the way I handled situations, and so none of us are above reproach for that.
Right.
But,
we're all going to have good days and bad days.
Yeah.
It's so true.
So how can people learn more about you or get in touch with you if they want to work with you?
Gentle Response. I have my webpage. Everything is social media driven, right? So I'm on all the big platforms. I really encourage people to check out my YouTube page, because that's where I will do a lot of what I call educational, informational videos. I'll pick something that happened in the news or social media, and I'll talk about how de-escalation knowledge and skills would have played a huge role on changing the outcome of some of these situations, whether it was a road rage or whatever, fast food, churches. So I do that. But otherwise, my webpage, you can reach out to me and email me there, john@gentle-response.com. From what I understand, I have enough of a footprint that if just typing in Gentle Response, I'm going to pop up on the first page. So, which
That's
is a good
awesome.
thing, I think. So
I think it's a great thing.
It's a great thing. Well, John, we can't thank you enough for enlightening us today on this very important topic. And as we discussed early on, I think
are we done? All right.
Well, yes, we will definitely have you back on again.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming on and talking about this.
Thank you.
Ready to change how you're seen and charge what you're worth? If you're not getting enough opportunities to meet with ideal customers, or the prospects you're meeting with just aren't ideal, it's most likely your brand that's holding you back. So if you're a coach, consultant, or expert who is on the rise, you need our ultimate guide to a freedom-based brand. Download it free now at brandfaceguide.com.